This is Marlborough House in London, one of the royal palaces. I'm standing on the west staircase, and this behind me is the painting painted by Louis Leguay, who lived in 1663 to 1721. It was started originally under the direction of the Duchess of Marlborough to be presented, the house and the paintings, to her husband who'd been successful in a series of battles. The size of this painting is 28 feet by 14, approximately. And I worked here for about 2 years, cleaning and restoring. And whilst working on this, Her Majesty the Queen came down and asked me how we did it, and I demonstrated on the spot where I'm standing how to remove the varnish. We erected a running scaffold. This is to say a scaffold that's like the floor. And it was a bit shaky, but it held 6 feet below the top of the ceiling, and then having done this all around on all the pictures around the staircase, we dropped the scaffold about 6, no, it was 5 feet 6 because I'm short, and we dropped it 5 feet 6, and then I think 3 or 4 times we dropped the scaffold, but we never knew what was going to be underneath because the paintings were brown. In fact, the Queen did mention that she'd run up and down this staircase as a little girl and never knew there were paintings on the wall. She just thought they were painted brown. It's the kind of, I can't say dirty picture, the most discoloured pictures I've ever seen in my life. On each corner of each painting in Marlborough House that we worked on, we left an area roughly 4-6 square inches to show the amount of previous restoration and the previous varnishes on there. I removed the varnish by brand new razor blades, I think about 11,000 used on one wall alone, inserted into the ordinary holder used for cleaning windows. And I timed the very strong solvent by the second until I achieved the maximum, I think, was about 16 coats I could remove in one go with a blade, but then that blundered after about 2 stripes of 4 feet an inch. It was necessary to work in this very quickly, take it right down, and the last coat of all was absolutely black. I mean, I can't describe it as even brown, and this was one very, very fine coat that had been applied over Leguay's work, and the varnish had set up a linoxine skin of its ultimate strength and a loss of clarity, so it was hiding the original. This is the local pub called the Marlborough Head in Dedham, which I frequent now and again. And they have a painting in the next room which is quite dirty, been there about 15 or 20 years, which the landlord has asked me to clean as a demonstration. He is paying me £1 a day for the next 14 years. This is the painting I told you about, and which is a moderately good quality painting. And I've chosen this because there are many millions of these paintings in the world, and many hundreds of thousands in pubs, probably in clubs and homes all over the country. We call it euphemistically a pot boiler. We look at the back of it to see the condition of the canvas slip and frame. This is the canvas slip frame. It's, as usual, quite dirty. No reflection upon the housewife. Very common. Dust collects in a downward fashion from the air everywhere. If you take your floorboards up, you'll find a lot of filth. And we have to take this out of the frame, and you will see that this old chain, once held together, probably 30, 40 years ago, snapped, probably in the war, something, or being shifted about. Piece of string's been put across. I'll take those out. It's a good thing to use pincers for cutting things like this. And it's better still, once this is free, to take the eyes out, the screw eyes out, so that there are no protrusions to stick into the canvas. This is in a very dangerous state. The slip is held in with these tacks. Now, we remove this very carefully. Forget its intrinsic value is not a lot, but one treats every painting as though it were a Rembrandt. One should respect always the work of other people. I remove these tacks the only way possible. There are usually two on each edge. Make sure, be very careful of the rust damage, gently. Found another one. They must have been a very wealthy family, extra tack. Now it's free now of danger in that respect. I'll put the frame away. I've got a blanket. One must disregard what is on the front. Make sure this is clean. It would damage the front of the painting. We deal with the back. These wedges or keys hold the stretcher together and also tighten the canvas if it's slack. And you take these out very carefully. And if it's tough, gently tap a pair of pincers like this. This is perished, very common. All part of the process of cleaning a painting is the cleaning of the inside of the stretcher. I'm inserting a round palette knife. You could use a table knife. Very carefully, else you'll come through the canvas. This is an original canvas, about nearly 100 years old. Not very old, but old enough for canvas. It's time this picture was lined with a new canvas. But if you're very careful, I'm taking out the dust that's accumulated over nearly a century. Now, this is the bottom of the picture, yes. And yesterday in the pub, I felt something there, and I know that there'll be a... Yes. And I'll show you this. A nasty conglomeration of very unhealthy dust. I once found love letters and once 5 sovereigns, and often matchsticks, very frequently pieces of straw, and in one very famous painting, there's a 6-inch nail there. But all this filth, it's very unhealthy and not to be recommended. A quick way to do it is to very gently tap. I won't overdo that because my lungs are not good. But then, having cleaned the whole of this and dusted it with a light duster, it's a good idea to have a little water, on a very, very little water, just to take the dust from here. Having cleaned the back, and if the picture is very, very wrinkled, then I have to emphasize it's very dangerous to take these jobs on unless you know what you're doing. Before you start cleaning the front of the picture, you insert strips of board, cardboard, anything, under the canvas, between the canvas and the stretcher, so that as you work on the other side, it stops the stretcher edge from damaging the canvas and subsequently the painting. Wedges are shaped thus and curved on the continent. And this tells you often if a picture's from the continent, because always they curve the wedges. We in this country are less aesthetic and just sharpen the edge. Now, if it's put in this way, a different action takes place. which forces the two mitres apart in the wrong way. So always put the wedges back with the slope down this way. Do each alternate corner. So we tap away like a piano tuner, really. Canvas is tight, not too tight. Little slack left. We turn it over and examine the front. Fill around the edges. The edges, the piece of cardboard I put in have now cupped, and you can apply quite a bit of pressure now. This canvas is in a tenuous state. It's about 100 years old, and the painting really should be relined with fresh canvas to give it strength. This will add 100 or 200 years onto the picture. Indeed, it would add 1,000 years on practically with the modern wax process canvassing, but very expensive. The picture hardly warrants that in expense. It has superficial dirt on it, the accumulation of about 8 million years of cigarettes and baccy, pipes and so on, and indeed beer. If you look at the public house ceiling, you will realise in 5 years the accumulation is fantastic. It goes very dark brown. What I'm taking off now is the superficial dirt, not the varnish. You use warm water with a tiny touch of ammonia in it. Don't use things like household, for cleaning lavatories and stuff. Baby's soap is best, the clear quality. I mustn't mention the name. This is smoke and beer. This is not discoloured varnish. And you gently, in a circular motion, take off the superficial dirt. The picture itself, one must always remember, is completely covered with varnish. It's irrespective of what is underneath it. Now, I can tell, and only by experience of cleaning hundreds of thousands of paintings, that this on here is a relatively hard varnish. When this, you must keep the picture dry all the time, as quickly as possible. Take off the superfluous moisture. The reason for this, the dirt is still coming off. The reason for this is because it goes through the back and will lift the picture if it's left too wet with water. It doesn't matter about turpentine substitute. That doesn't affect it in the same way. In the removal of varnishes, several processes take place. One is friction, if it's mastic, by fingertips. The other is the use of solvents. The traditional method handed down father to son, and let's face it, is a trade secret, is the use of varying strengths in solvent on one piece of cotton wool. I have a very strong solvent here, a mixture of methylated spirits and turpentine with a touch of ammonia in it. I've already lost 2 fingers. You cork the bottle. Always re-cork bottles. This is ordinary turpentine substitute known as white spirit. This neutralizes the action of this. And you have to move very, very quickly. You'll feel the action of this powerful solvent take place immediately. And you kill the action of it like this. This is the copal varnish being removed. It's not to be recommended for the faint-hearted. I'm only doing this to show off because I'm on television, but it's quite safe if you're fast with this. This is not paint yet. This is just the varnish coming off. It's working because from experience I know the strength of the solvents to use. Under normal conditions, the better quality the painting, the higher quality, the great masters, Rembrandt, Titian, etc., usually in private collections, and knowing the value of them, both the intrinsic value and the aesthetic qualities, they are used, they are well looked after. They look much better cared for than the ordinary little pot boiler like this is, that, with due respect to the gentleman who painted it, whose name was H. Cooper, I don't think it was Henry Cooper, the boxer. Oh, I know him as a nice chap. I don't think he paints pot boilers. Actually, he's got one of my own paintings, which is the same thing. At the end of a picture as small as this, you will almost get a bucketful of discoloured varnish. When I worked at Marlborough House, I had dustbinfuls at the end of the day, or one dustbinful. I've applied to this talcum powder. Chalk or oatmeal or sawdust serves the same purpose. One, to dry out the excess of liquid. Two, in the interstices of the painting, in the deeps, because paintings are like, these kind of paintings are like mountain ranges. You get the impasto and the valleys. And the valleys on this tell me where there is varnish that hasn't yet been removed. It's very important to know this, because if you start scrubbing away to get that piece out, you will take the paint off of the area around it. The third reason is much more important. It frightens the life out of the owner if they walk into your studio and see their picture like that. We'll shake this off, gently tap in the back. Now, you'll observe whilst we're here, the back is clean, and hygienically so, more or less. It's had a lot of turpentine through it. That's clean. All the little spiders have gone away. And the excess of this is removed with a dry cloth or swab. But it's told me where there are little pieces of varnish under the white, so I know now, more or less, to help the eyesight, to take this out with a surgeon's blade, razor blade, some sharp instrument, carefully, taking your time. And this is the safest way to clean the picture. Once that is done, I'm sure there'll be no restoration needed on this painting at all. If there was restoration needed, or there happened to be a hole in it, which is very common amongst painters, we get a piece of gauze or old canvas. It's best to get the canvas the same tension, same strength as the canvas that the picture is painted on, and one frays the edges of this as much as possible, and you would place that over the hole. So you do that, and you lift the edges before the beeswax dries. So you allow it to hang loose. With beeswax, you melt and gently iron it with just a warm iron. It will last roughly 500 years. And you turn your picture back, fill the hole with a gesso or a patent modern filler. They're quite good, actually. Having removed the varnishes from the front of the painting with solvents, and also placing it in the sun for a very short time, about 5 minutes, an hour in a very weak sun, creates the effect of having ultraviolet rays lighten the lights for you. It also dries the painting out very quickly, quickly enough to create a craquelure effect, because underneath the paint structure is size on the canvas. This causes cracks in paintings over the years. They come in many different kinds. We judge the age of a painting by its craquelure. The tinier the cracks, the earlier the painting, until we come up to the 19th century where you get crocodile cracks caused with bitumen. There are many kinds of cracks which I can't go into now. But there is now a patina of craquelure showing through on the painting. I've removed the varnishes, the drying powder, and now the canvas is in a very taut, or taut enough situation. There remains some varnish still in the, let's call it the hollows of the picture, which have to be removed with a round-bladed surgeon's knife. And I use this because I have weak eyesight, but anyone with a good eyesight, you look through and you'll see these little pieces and quite gently scrape them out of the pieces. This, of course, takes a bit of time, take several hours. Sometimes they take days. The painting is, let us say, to be honest, 95% clean now. It would take much longer to clean it than I have at the moment, but I'll give it a coat of intermediate varnish, of damal, which will last much longer than the copal without those disastrous results of discolouring you saw. I'll coat half of it. Now, when you're varnishing a painting, use a clean brush, clean table, clean room, hang sheets of damp sheets over the doors and allow the room to be quiet for at least a day if you can, in an ordinary household. And this is to stop dust coming down. This is a spirit varnish and should be applied spiritedly. Brush it well, excuse me, brush it well out. It doesn't need a lot. It's very economical. It isn't expensive relative to copal, as is generally thought. That one brushful will do the whole picture. This is how it looks, varnished and unvarnished. This is, as the varnish on it has been virtually completely removed, it's sucking a little more than one would have on an ordinary canvas, but so it doesn't matter to flood it a bit here and there. Crisscross it long ways and across. And now we come to a magical thing about varnishing. There's an enormous amount of controversy concerning it. People complain that it is too shiny. With damar, allowing it to dry a little, and you feather it off the shortest distance across the painting. As I do this, it evens out the varnish much better than an air spray, which should be banned a whole lot because it's a lot of trouble. But then, having done that, gently draw it across the other way. I'm not only spreading the varnish evenly, but creating less gloss, because the spirit in the varnish, the pure turpentine, is going into the atmosphere, most of it into my lungs, incidentally, and just allowing the pure damar resin to remain. Now, if we go back again, it won't be necessary to do this more than once because this is a coarse painting. But in anything like a highly finished portrait, you can do this until it's almost what is known as a matte finish. And it would dry and last. And that is not, in any way, a bad varnish effort for a little picture like this. I mean, it's not going to be too glossy in the pub. And that's it.